to the Sherborn School Committee meeting on March 12th. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:33. We're going to start tonight with the FY20 budget adjustments.
Great, so welcome everyone. In your packet, I've provided you sort of a summary memo and then another statement of some changes that we've made based on the advisory's new guidance that came out, which we sort of got indication of when we were at our last meeting. So I think you sort of heard some of the background behind that, but subsequent to that, we did receive a communication from Sherborn Advisory, which I included a copy of the email, which is what we got in your packet, that you can put in your book too, so that you have the updated guidance. So based on that, we had a little more work we needed to do. And so we have 3 more adjustments that we've made to your budget. Only really one budget adjustment. The other 2 were just going and finding some additional funding sources. So the first one that is the true budget adjustment is, as you know, we had in the first pass of the budget included a 0.2 additional psychologist to bring our current 0.8 to a 1.0. That is something that I think, based on everything else that we have that we want to bring on next year, that's the one piece we're looking to take off, so that we can accommodate some of the other requests. So that's the only reduction in the budget as was presented. The other 2 adjustments, one is we looked at our pre-K revolving fund, and based on the tuition that we know is going to come in next year, plus what we already have in there, we feel very comfortable of moving an EA over to the pre-K revolving fund. So that will remove $26,800 from your operating budget. And the other discussion that we had, I think at the last meeting, was the use of circuit breaker. So we are increasing our use of circuit breaker by another $25,000. That brings you at just under 60% reimbursement rate. And we couple that with the money that we're already bringing forward too from fiscal year 19, so that we're applying $340,000 of circuit breaker funds to your fiscal year 20 budget. With those 3 adjustments in mind, we bring the operating budget down to your $7,298,819. If you see that as of 3/12, so that gives you an increase of $226,338. When we, I'm sorry, let me put that on. 1,760. 338. Because what you'll see, and let me pass these out to make it easier than what I put in your packet. To make it easier to tie to the town's budget, you'll see that the $25,000 of literacy specialists for the grants and the utilization of the non-resident tuition fund on your sheet that was in the packet was below as additional funds. In the new sheet I've given you, I've moved it up, so it's actually coming out of your operating budget. That way, I won't have to do the little asterisks like I did for the $19,000. It just makes it cleaner. So we will take items from your operating budgets and directly charge it to those 2 sources, and therefore we're looking at your net. You just have to keep in mind, though, that when we don't use those funds in the following year, they will come back on to the general fund, which is why I usually try to keep it at the bottom, but it becomes messy to reconcile. So I've given in to that and moved them up. So your new increase then is, I gave all mine away, is the, I got it here, is the $176,338. So we know the town gave us 2% increase in salaries, so that we can take $106,965 off of that. And that brings you down to your $88,000 gap, if you see that. We, just so you know, and I think we mentioned this last time, the region is not using 100% of their salary allocation given to them by the town. So I think when we spoke with Kate and Andrew and I, or actually Angie, Andrew and I spoke with advisory, they were willing to look at the schools in total, and therefore that unused allocation we can put towards the Pine Hill. So then that brings you down another $63,000. So we're really looking at a gap of about $25,000 compared to Advisory's guidance. So we did run that by advisory prior to this meeting to make sure that they were comfortable with that, and all indications was that they were. Otherwise, we've had to go back into the budget and try to find something else to take out, and we felt very strongly about all the other items in the budget. So these adjustments now are then incorporated into the PowerPoint that you'll see for the presentation, which is why we wanted to go over them before, so that you fully understood the numbers in the presentation. Any questions on any of that? Good.
Just to to reiterate that the psychologist position going up to 5.2 is very important to us, but we also did recognize that advisory's position, the town's position, is extremely and unusually tight. It's always tight in any community's budget, but this year's Sherborn's particularly hit from many different directions, and so we feel as if that's something that we would just have to wait a year for. We've been through this whole discussion about the importance of psychologists and adjustment counselors and BCBAs, but we recognize that this was one spot that we could show some flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, is there a chance that the town will not be able to give us this additional $25,000? And if that's the case, do we have a plan B?
Well, so that's why because when we went to advisory, it was a little less clear, just that that our budget as it existed was high. And so we had a discussion about circuit breaker, and the amount of circuit breaker we're applying is more than we're typically comfortable with doing. So it was sort of a compromise position in our saying, we will get out there on the limb and use more circuit breaker money, but we'd also like to have that $63,000 applied from the region's funds that they didn't need. And so they were agreeable to that, and then we said we would come back to them with a whatever other possibilities we could come up with to get it close.
Okay.
And so when we wrote to Stephen Leahy, he said he felt like that was the right spot for us to be. So we're pretty confident.
Good.
Yep.
Does anybody have any other questions about that? All right, thanks, Don. So on your agendas, it says community comments now, but we'd actually like to hold those for after the public hearings so that people can listen to the proposal and then ask questions. So at this point, I have to adjourn the Sherborn School Committee meeting and open the public hearing on the proposed FY20 budget. Correct? All right. So, Dr. Key, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So some of this is it might be repetitive for those of us on the school committee or those involved at this level, but the folks at home may not make these connections. So I hope I don't repeat myself too much. But the FY20 budget is, as all of the budgets for Sherborn, Dover, and the Dover-Sherborn Regional, they are all mission-driven. And the reason that's important is because we want people to understand that when we're asking for things in the budget, it's consistent with our district mission, and our strategic plan and our goals within the strategic plan. So the mission for the Dover-Sherborn schools is to inspire, challenge, and support all students as they discover and pursue their full potential. And the strategic plan, which obviously includes the mission and our core values of commitment to community, equity and excellence, respect and dignity, and climate of care, all of this is built on the work of the strategic plan, and you can see the 5 goals there. of innovative teaching and learning, health and well-being of students and staff, partnerships with families and communities, safe and innovative facilities, and resource efficiency. Those are kind of our big buckets, and then obviously we have a lot of work underneath those that we're striving to accomplish. So hopefully what people will see is a connection with our asks and our goals. So it's just important for people to understand that.
Great. Thank you. All right, our budget overview. The FY20 budget is responsible and supports our district's mission and strategic plan objectives, as Dr. Keogh just mentioned. Our compliance with state mandates, for example, special education, our compliance with school district policies like class size, and the safekeeping of the town facilities and assets. Our budget guidelines are acute appreciation for the town's finances, as Dr. Keogh mentioned earlier, and adherence to advisory's budget guidance of level funded with a 2% increase for salaries. Our budget assumptions. For FY20, enrollment is projected to be between 368 to 377 students. We have reduced one classroom section. The budget includes 19 sections as opposed to the 20 we have now. So in 2019, 2020, the average class size is projected to be 19.6 with 19 sections, and all of those sections are well within our class size policy. Our in-district costs reflect additions needed to provide programming for our current student cohort. We'll get into that a little more in a minute. And our out-of-district tuition costs presented in the budget are offset by $340,000 of circuit breaker funding, which Don mentioned, which is $25,000 more than we used last year, or this current year. All right, our operating budget is made up of two major components, the in-district and the out-of-district. The Pine Hill School, we see up there at the top, that's in-district. You'll see that our budget for FY20 goes up by roughly $200,000. We'll get into that in a minute. And then, that's okay. Under that, OOD stands for out-of-district. That, for various reasons that we will get into, has gone down by about $6,000 because of some placement changes going down and then some transportation costs going up.
62,000. Drop it.
Dropped by 62,000, right. Oh, sorry, and then,
Said 6.
sorry, 62,000. So our total increase with the two is $195,473. All right, our budget drivers. In district, increases from FY19, you can see the salaries have gone up. We are adding an autism program that Dr. Keogh will get into in a minute, and a literacy specialist. Additional special ed support also will be on the next slide, and then some miscellaneous other non-salary related expenses that are largely technology and new software related. Decreases from FY19 are, as I mentioned, we're reducing by one classroom section. We have some savings from one retirement this year. We have some post FY19 staffing changes and a reduction in speech services. We're also utilizing a non-resident tuition fund of $25,000.
Yes, so with regard to the special education and in-district programming and supports, the autism program that Kate just mentioned is something that we really feel like we need at Pine Hill School. We do have a cohort of students on the autism spectrum who will need supports. But the aim is, as always, to provide our students their education in the least restrictive environment as possible, which is really the intent of the special ed law. And in this case, the least restrictive environment is at Pine Hill School. So we do have enough students to warrant the development of this program. We think it's going to be a great thing. Those students are currently in our integrated preschool, and so they'll need that additional support. It will work in conjunction with regular education. So the students will be in the general education classrooms to the greatest extent possible, but will need a home base for support. And some, our students have varying degrees of challenges, so some may need more time in the program and some may need less time in the program. But we feel strongly that it should be there, and that would include a lead educator, a BCBA, as mentioned before, and educational assistants. With regard to the special education administrative reorg, it's been a few months since we talked about this, but the plan for this year is to, or for FY20, is to move from a model where we have a pre-K to 12 director of special education to a model, and that's serving both Dover, Sherborn, and Dover, Sherborn Regional, moving to a model where we have a director of student services. But the director of student services would now include special education guidance and nursing, oversight of all those services. In order to do that realistically, and in response to some of the information obtained through our special education review, we made the decision and recommendation to provide the Director of Student Services with a special education coordinator, which would be an administrative position. So currently we do not have any administrative special educators at the elementary level. This would include an administrative position for a special education coordinator who would work both supervising special ed at Pine Hill School and at Chickering. And we would also have a team chair, also shared between Chickering and Pine Hill. As mentioned, both schools currently have their own team chair, and both schools have their own administrative assistant. So this is in many ways a reduction, which is why it didn't hit our budget in a huge way. So that's really the special education kind of in a nutshell as it pertains to this budget.
Thank you. Okay, our FY20 budget drivers, to get into a little more detail with the out-of-district costs. The total out-of-district costs being $1,064,363, which is after our circuit breaker money. So we had increases from FY19. We had 4 new placements. We include an estimated 3% increase in tuition costs, and the transportation company we used had a significant change this year, which was more than we anticipated. Our decreases were that 4 of our students either graduated or aged out of their out-of-district placements. It's important to remember that we are responsible for educating children in Sherborn with special needs from ages 3 to 22 years old. And then we had budgeted for 3 out-of-district placements, and those students actually remained in the district, saving us $145,000. And then we also used $25,000 more than we were initially comfortable with from circuit breaker, resulting in our decrease of $5,946. So this all brings us to our overall gap of $25,508. And our total ask for FY20 for Sherborn would be $7,248,819. And I want to thank Dr. Keough and Ms. McCoy, and especially Don, for all of their really hard work on this, especially since we had to be creative. Yeah. Okay, so at this point, I would like to close the public hearing and reconvene the Sherborn School Committee meeting. All right, thank you. So now I would be happy to entertain public comment. Hearing none? Okay, hearing none. We will move on to discussion and a vote of the FY20 budget.
I have a question. So the Director of Guidance is going to be moving to a pre-K through 12 position. Is there an increase in salary that goes with that we're responsible for a portion of?
No.
Okay.
But the responsibilities, as I mentioned back in December, maybe January, for that director is really just to coordinate the conversations between the guidance folks at Pine Hill and Chickering, and to be at the table for discussions when we're having kind of whole child discussions. And so her expertise is really being shared down, but no, it's not. We didn't really see the job or the role expanding too dramatically.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's a good question.
Any other questions?
I have a question about the circuit breaker. So if we're increasing the amount we're using from that, and we're assuming a 60% reimbursement rate, what happens if that's not the rate? Like, what are the ramifications of?
So I don't think you'll be, they've already, in the budget, approved a little under 70% is what's in the
Okay.
governor's budget right now.
Okay.
So 60%, we haven't seen below 60% in probably 5 to 8 years. Hovering between 65 and 75. So that's sort of that's the highest you probably would want to go though ever, and not have to worry about exactly what you said.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Oh, that's a good question. Any other questions? All right. Then I would like to make a motion to approve the FY20 Sherborn School operating budget of $7,248,819.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Great, the motion passes, thank you.
Super.
Thank you.
That's great, thanks.
Okay, the principal's report.
Well, thank you. Our last school committee meeting, believe it or not, was only 2 instructional weeks ago because of the school vacation week. So you have a summary of some of the enrichment and professional development that's happened. But I wanted to highlight a couple things that teachers are feeling really excited about since our last meeting. Allison had organized groups of our K-1 and grades 2-3 teachers to go to Lexington to see a fully developed readers and writers workshop model, and folks were really leaning in with interest and asking questions, and they had an opportunity to debrief what they saw with teachers from another district, and as you know, that's really powerful. In our small district, it's really important to get out and see what other school systems are doing for effective practices. Another group of teachers went to a one-day overview course for the responsive classroom model, which we're excited to bring and revitalize. Some of our teachers were trained many years ago to both Chickering and Pine Hill School. The teachers came back, again, it was just a one-day overview. We're planning to run the full course during the last week in June if everything goes according to plan. But teachers came back really excited about the strategies for connectedness and high efficacy for student learning, and being diligent to develop a strong climate and culture of care. As you know, that's the plate on which everything rests. It's well seeped in our school improvement plan and our district strategic plan. So we're really leaning with that. Related to that, as an offshoot, we met with DSEF board members today to go over the grants that we've requested, some specific for Pine Hill, some specific for shared across the elementary level, and one grant that we wrote vertically across all 4 campuses. So we'll obviously keep you posted about that, but the common thread there is they have to do with innovative teaching, culture, climate of care, and reading and writers workshop model. So it's neat to see all of those threads woven together, if you will, with our professional development work. Something that teams of teachers and Allison have been spending a tremendous amount of time on behind the scenes is building our schedule for next year. And I perhaps, depending on our agenda at our next meeting, we'll spend a little bit of time highlighting some of the gains we hope to get for increased collaboration, increased intervention for students, and less fragmented instructional time, and maybe even some more playtime in the schedule. So we'll plan to do a broad overview at the next meeting. Some hours and hours and hours have been going into this, and everyone's hand has been in it from a collegial buy-in standpoint. So shaking and moving for this year and planning ahead for next year. Any questions?
I had a question. When teachers go, like a couple teachers went to Lexington to learn about the literacy workshops, how do they bring that information back and share it with other teachers in their cohort?
That's a great question, and many ways. And I don't know if you want to talk about where through common planning team within grade level structures. Monday afternoons, we have vertical teaming, what we call teacher inquiry, and working, certainly the coaching through supervision and evaluation are some of the ways. Yeah.
And just, I think, bringing back the excitement, and I saw teachers, I saw this, and I'm going to try this. They're taking photos, showing, so
That's great.
also the small ways, too, I think make a big impact.
Good, okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Brown? Okay, sounds great, thanks. That brings us to Assistant Superintendent, Ms. McCoy.
Thank you. So as Dr. Brown said, there's really only been 2 instructional weeks since we met last time. So the report is brief. I would just like to say congratulations to Challenge Success for bringing in another successful speaker. It was really quite a thoughtful and informative event with Dr. Steiner Adair. I must say I went home feeling like a guilty parent, but we have since tightened things up on the home front, and I'm happy to share with others as an educator. So thank you, and please keep up the good work in that regard. That being said, Dr. Keough and I have now made it to all 4 faculty meetings presenting what we had presented to the parents on November 8th at this evening with the superintendent about the 2 strategic goals, one about social emotional well-being and the other innovative teaching and learning. As much as teachers love to talk about the strategic plan, they really want to know what matters to them. So we focused on those 2 buckets and gave our vision for where we'd like the social emotional learning and innovative teaching to bring us. So all 4 campuses have heard that. Lots of enthusiasm, which is great, and we'll continue to work at that. That being said, we do have 2 innovation committee events coming up, which are on the back. And I would really like to kind of advertise and invite you to think about coming. March 21st, which is next Thursday, we have the Industry Think Tank panel. So that is an opportunity for parents from Sherborn and Dover, as well as community members in all different fields, to present on a panel about kind of a day in the life in that field, how they got there, and what they foresee their job evolving to between now and 2035, which is when our current kindergartners are going to graduate from college, and the skills that they predict they'll need. So that's coming up, and then April 10th, we'll have a panel of both college admissions reps and college professors talking about the changing front of college admissions and how they're starting to look more at the whole child, community service, empathy, capstones, independent projects, as they start to see really, aside from what a child can do on a standardized test, what they can really do in terms of those soft skills that we've been talking about. So please consider coming. We'd love to have you. And, as we've seen with the 4 faculties and in various different meetings, as well as with the DSEF, they invited us to come last night and talk about our vision and how it played into the grants that have been proposed. Lots of excitement. So we want to make sure we get the most out of these discussions and research opportunities in order to create our portrait, which will then drive our work moving forward.
Question.
Sure.
These 2 dates that you mentioned, are they open to students as well?
Yes.
I think high school students in particular might.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. Yep. I didn't want to go on the heels of our newsletter, but I'm hoping tomorrow to send out a reminder and an invitation to the community. And I did actually think about the high school kids getting an invitation as well. So thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. McCoy? You're not the only one who left the speaker thinking about many things. I'm sure Charlie and Caden were not happy with that.
No.
Great, thank you. Okay, Dr. Keough.
Thank you very much. I'm just making a note to myself, because we're also sending out something on the start times, the new flyer, which has a new RSVP. So we'll have to sync that up, do those together.
We'll fight over dates.
To send it?
Yeah.
I'm ready tomorrow.
I was ready yesterday.
Of course you were.
But the newsletter went out yesterday.
I believe you. I believe you. So, yes, so a good deal of the information in my report is information that you're well aware of. I just want to highlight and make sure people at home also know that our Director of Student Services search is well underway. We actually are bringing forward 2 finalists, and they are Elisa Waldman-Sisson and Kate McCarthy. So they will be visiting Dover Sherborn on Thursday. So we're really excited about that. I know that you, as school committee members, received the breakdown of the day, and notice has gone home to families as well and our teachers. So we're really looking forward to spending some time with these 2 candidates who we think are really strong, and to hearing the feedback from those who get the chance to have conversations with them. So that's Thursday. My plan is to, assuming everything goes well, is to come to the special meeting of the joint school committee meeting, school committees. And I have March 18th, but that may have changed. Did Cheryl confirm with you guys that day? 20th, sorry. Okay, so that was in motion when I was writing this. So, if all goes well, we will have a new Director of Student Services very soon, which would allow us to then post for our Special Education Coordinator at the elementary level, which is obviously very important to Pine Hill School. So that's moving along. I do definitely want to continue to emphasize that the Start Times Task Force is meeting, is developing scenarios, possible scenarios for the Dover Sherborn schools, and is planning to bring those possibilities forward to the meeting of the joint school committees on April 9th. So that's right around the corner. While all of this has been going on, obviously the new presentation from Dr. Seisler on the 26th, I have been going out to the schools to obviously speak with teachers. We've met with all the different teaching staffs in the system, but I've also tried to have conversations with kids. And I just yesterday met with the middle school students from the student council, just to kind of field their questions and have a date planned to speak with 9th and 10th graders at the high school because they, on Friday, because they're the only students who would potentially be impacted by a change. Because if a change were to go into effect, it would be not next year, but the year after, which means our current juniors and seniors would be gone. So we're going to speak with the 9th and 10th graders about that on Friday. And obviously, we want feedback from people. So we have a webpage that people can go to. We have an email address on that webpage. If you go to the Dover Sherborn webpage, you'll easily find, it's pretty easy to find the start times information. And there's some great videos in there that help people to see why we're even looking at it. And so there's a lot going on. This week, the newsletter went out. I hope you got that. We've gotten a lot of good feedback that people feel as if it's to the point. You know, we're talking about the things that are important to people because we're in this age of overload. There's so much information coming at people, so we try and just tell people what are the kind of most salient points that they need to know about what we're doing in the school system. So I feel good about that. One piece of feedback that I hear is, can't you do it more often? And that would be nice, but then that sort of defeats the purpose, which is to not overload people. So we're somewhere in there is the balance. And maybe it's every other month as opposed to every 3 or 4 months. So we're going to keep looking at that. And then I mentioned the meetings here, and I may have mentioned some of these to you before. One important piece that I want to remind people of is that, and I hope people understand that this is a big year for us. This is the 50th year METCO anniversary for Dover Sherborn, and they actually have a 50-year celebration on Saturday, April 6th. So I linked the invitation in your packet or into your my report, and I hope people can come. I think that's going to be a great night, and I'm really looking forward to it. And that's it.
Could you also talk about the dads group?
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
going to be April 11th.
April 11th, yep. Dr. Freeman and I have been talking over and over about at first it started with this idea that we need to continue to work with our parents to provide them with support, and you know that's in the kind of in our goals. It's one of the major ones, working with families and community. We know our parents need support. The world's changing, the kids are changing, the kinds of things they're exposed to is changing, the technology is changing. So we had initially were talking about, like, can we just set up some times to perhaps put more experienced parents in front of less experienced parents and connect them and maybe share what worked and what didn't, pitfalls and things like that. But Mari said, how about a group just for the dads? Because it's fairly common for fathers, for example, to feel as if everything is addressed to the women in the children's lives, and for the men to feel as if like they're not equal in the role of parenting. And so we're just going to process some of that and hopefully spend some time just getting to know each other and talking about some of the common challenges. So I'm really, really psyched about it. Mari is so on top of it. As soon as I said I was willing, he made sure that it happened. So we're really excited about that, and it is. It's April 11th.
Great. Yep.
Anybody have questions for Dr. Keough? Great, thank you. Lots of good things. Okay, the monthly FY19 finance report.
Yes, so in your packet, you have your status of appropriations as of March 7th. I usually try to give you as close as you can to your meeting date because we're always processing bills and purchase orders, and therefore it gives you the most up-to-date information. So as far as salaries go, we're still looking to be in line with budget. Some of the savings that we had from educator staffing changes, which if you saw from your PowerPoint that helped us with our fiscal year 20 budget, this year are offsetting some of our increases in the educational assistants that we had to add based on student cohort. I think I mentioned, and I mentioned again here, that we are seeing an increase in our occupational services based on current needs of about 15,000. Although that shows that it's negative in that line item, if you look down into your expenditures under sped services, we actually have money in sped services to cover that in the operating side of the expenditure versus the salaries. It's just where it's getting charged, but we know we have funds to cover that. So I'm not concerned that the salary budget looks over because we have it sitting in contracted services. It's just a matter of when that person comes in, are they coming and working regular hours? If so, we put them on payroll versus paying them like a contractor. So I just wanted to point that out so you weren't concerned about salaries. On expenditures, there's really no material variances to report right now. Now that we have the budgets complete, we'll refocus on the current year for a little bit, and so we'll spend between now and your May meeting going through all the open purchase orders, looking at all the extra expenses that we think, and we will start doing initial projections for you at the May meeting, so you can sort of start seeing where we're going to end up as of June 30th. So that will be information coming forth in May. On out of district, I bring forward great news, good news, in that your negative variance actually decreased because of some placement changes. Frequently, we're used to hearing placement changes costing us additional money. In this particular case, we had some reductions. So reductions in the amount of about $60,000. So that brings your overall operating variance down to just under $50,000. You will see on your status of appropriations how in italices we put the circuit breaker information, because remember your operating budget excludes those expenses, but I think it's important to look at it in total. And if you have your statement from last time we met on the circuit breaker line that's sort of sitting there in the middle, we only had about 46,000 left in there. Now we have 76, because that's where half of that 60,000 fell was in our circuit breaker, and the other half was in our operating fund. What we'll do now too is we'll go back and we will look at all the open purchase orders and start adjusting some to use additional circuit breaker to make up for the operating loss in our general fund. So we sort of let everything settle, and then towards the end of the year is when we go and sort of clean that up. On the bottom line where it says total expected circuit breaker for this year, the 387, I just wanted to remind the committee that we also get some in-district circuit breaker. So we have some students in district that we serve that cross the threshold and we're allowed to get circuit breaker. If you remember on your staffing report, we use some of those funds to pay for educational assistance assigned to those students. So what we do is, we didn't do that the first year, so we're allowed to carry forward some circuit breaker money. So the money that we carry forward is really what we apply to the next year's in-district, so we're never behind on that. So we skipped a year so that we're always ahead of it, so that we always know we're gonna have the money, and we don't have to wonder if it's gonna come through. So we have two 1-to-1 EAs right now that were charged to the circuit breaker using some of the leftover funds from last year, and we'll do the same for next year. So just so you understand that equation a little bit, that's not just your out-of-district circuit breaker, it's a combination of in and out. Any questions?
No questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, our, excuse me, annual school committee vote on the Mass School Choice Law.
Yes. So under the law, school systems are obligated to vote whether or not they are going to be a school choice system or not. School choice basically means that if you wanted to admit students from afar, from neighboring communities, but from out of Sherborn, you can. It means the committee has to buy into, first of all, accepting school choice, and then from that point forward, if somebody applies and comes through school choice, the district would receive $5,000 from the sending town, and we would then educate that student as we would our own. Once you've accepted that student, you have that student for the duration at $5,000 a year. I think a large reason why the Dover Sherborn schools have not participated is in part because of space issues. We have a fairly old building in Pine Hill, albeit in good shape, but it can be tight at times. Same thing with our other schools in the system. So that at various points, and you know our numbers go up and down and fluctuate, so I think that's one of the reasons why school committees have not supported it. And the second probably major reason is because our per pupil expenditure cost is more like 20,000 or more, depending on what level student we're talking about. So 5,000 is not going to cut it. So my recommendation is that the school committee vote to not participate in school choice.
Does anyone have questions or discussion items about that?
Can I add one more thing?
Please.
So, people sometimes get confused about special needs students. For example, we've talked about a special needs student from Dover coming. That is a different, that's entirely different than the school choice program.
No? No questions? All right. Okay, thank you. Then I would like to move to have the Sherborn schools not participate in school choice program for the 2019-2020 school year. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. The motion passes. All right, that brings us to our consent agenda, which is approval of the February 15th minutes. Did anyone have any changes that they wanted to make to those? It's quiet. Okay. Then I would like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 15th, 2019.
Second.
Any further discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. The rest of the information is just for your communication review. So at this point, unless we have anything further, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Great, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.